So if you're listening to this, you probably already know that feeling of striving for this perfect, elusive state of
Oh,
balance.
absolutely. Everyone wants that.
Right. You spend years, trying to cultivate a mind that's peaceful, that's knowledgeable, and, completely free from the frantic anxieties of daily life, or even just the heavy inertia of laziness.
Yeah, you're trying to anchor yourself in goodness.
Exactly. But what if that very pursuit of peace, like that feeling of intellectual satisfaction and purity, what if that is actually the ultimate trap?
It's a scary thought.
It really is. What if the feeling of finally being quote unquote good is just the final, most sophisticated chain keeping you bound to an illusion? So today we are taking a deep dive into the hidden forces that drive our moods, our actions, and ultimately our destiny.
And we've got some heavy-hitting material to get through today.
We really do. We're looking at a stack of philosophical commentaries on chapter 14 of the ancient Bhagavad Gita, specifically the section titled Gunatrya Vibhaga Yoga, which translates to the yoga of the division of the three gunas. Right.
We're synthesizing insights from Swami Mukundananda, the classic commentary by Adi Shankaracharya, textual analysis from ISK Khan's Chaitanya Charan Das, and an essay by Mahendra Jani. And, our mission here isn't just to review some ancient texts. It's to decode the profound mechanics of how our own minds deceive us.
Yeah, because the central paradox we're exploring here is that the steering wheel of your life, it isn't actually connected to your eternal self.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's connected to the gunas, and like anyone familiar with this philosophy already knows the basic framework of prakriti, right? Material nature, and its three constituent gunasattva, rajas, and tamas. But the real value in these commentaries is how they decode the absolute deception of human autonomy.
Right, the illusion of free will.
Exactly. Adi Shankaracharya's commentary especially wrestles with how the interplay of these three forces actively deceives the observer into believing they're the author of their own actions.
So that concept of the observer being deceived, I think that brings us directly to the foundational mechanics of how we even got into this mess. Yeah, we have to look at the machinery first.
Right. Before we can talk about escaping these traps, the texts require us to look at the cosmic machinery we're operating inside of. They describe the creation of life through the lens of Prakriti functioning as a cosmic womb.
Mhm.
And the Supreme Lord is positioned as the seed-giving father, impregnating inert matter with spirit-meaning individual souls. And this union of matter and spirit gives birth to all living beings. The texts call this concept Hiranyagarbha, or the cosmic egg.
And Swami Mukundananda expands on this beautifully. He emphasizes that the matter forming this cosmic womb isn't just a neutral, passive container.
Right, it's not just an empty box.
Exactly. The gunas aren't simply properties that matter happens to possess. They are the fundamental substance of nature itself. And more terrifyingly for our sense of free will, they are the very attitudes with which the mind functions.
So the mind itself is made of these forces.
Yes. The mind is entirely constructed of sattva, rajas, and tamas. The eternal consciousness, the soul, is just kind of placed inside this machinery. So when the soul looks out through the machinery of the mind, it mistakenly identifies with the shifting gears of the gunas.
I was trying to visualize the psychological weight of this while reading through the sources, and it feels kind of like looking at the primary colors of human psychology.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Like if you take red, blue, and yellow, every single color in a painting is just a shifting mix of those three, right?
Right, yeah.
In the exact same way, every human personality, every fleeting mood, every sudden urge you have is just a shifting combination of sattva, rajas, and tamas. But the texts push it further. It isn't just that you experience these moods, it's that the moods are an autonomous physical process happening to you.
Which is such a paradigm shift. The commentaries point out that just as childhood, youth, and old age pass through a single physical body, without the soul actually changing age, these three gunas constantly cycle through a single mind. The individual consciousness is merely witnessing the weather.
Just watching it pass by.
Right. You might experience an incredibly clear, peaceful morning that's sattva peaking. But by noon, a frantic, ambitious drive to secure wealth or success takes over, filling you with stress.
And that's rajas.
Exactly, the sudden dominance of rajas. And then by evening, a heavy, mindless exhaustion sets in, where you simply want to zone out on the couch.
Let me guess, tamas taking the wheel.
You got it. The trap is that we say, I am peaceful, or I am stressed, or I am tired. We attribute the shifting of the physical machinery to our core identity.
Which naturally leads to the assumption that if the machinery is constantly shifting, well, we should just force it into the most comfortable gear.
That's the logical next step, right?
Right. We should strive to keep sattva dominant and avoid the destructive inertia of tamas, or the exhausting treadmill of rajas. But,
Hmm.
and this is where it gets crazy, the texts introduce a profound philosophical subversion. All three of these gunas are traps.
Every single one.
Every single one binds the eternal soul to the perishable body, just in different ways.
Because the goal of this specific philosophical framework is not merely moral elevation, it's ultimate liberation.
Right.
The texts detail the specific mechanisms of how each guna binds the soul. So tamas, the lowest mode, it binds through miscomprehension, laziness, and sleep.
So just total inertia.
Yeah, it's a state of delusion where the individual essentially sleepwalks through life, completely devoid of a higher purpose, just enveloped in darkness.
Okay, in rajas.
Rajas binds through insatiable thirst. It generates endless desires, ambitions, and a deep, agonizing attachment to the fruits of one's actions. When Rajas is dominant, you're locked into a cycle of earning, spending, saving, and perpetually worrying about losing what you've acquired.
I mean, those two are really easy to identify as negative states. We all recognize the destructive nature of pure apathy or relentless greedy ambition.
Oh, for sure.
But then the commentaries turn their attention to sattva, the mode of goodness, purity, and light. The sources explicitly state that sattva also binds the soul. It binds us through an attachment to happiness and knowledge.
Which is a tough pill to swallow.
Extremely. If you're listening to this and you're constantly striving for self-improvement, that should really give you pause. Why is the acquisition of knowledge and the experience of inner peace classified as a mechanism of bondage?
Well, Mahendrajani's essay addresses this exact tension. He references a parable told by the 19th century mystic Sri Ramakrishna. It's the parable of the three robbers, and it brilliantly illustrates the insidious nature of sattva.
I love this parable. Let's hear it.
So the parable describes a traveler walking through a dark forest who is suddenly ambushed by three robbers. The first robber, embodying tamas, demands that they simply kill the traveler and take all his possessions. Total senseless destruction.
The ultimate manifestation of delusion and cruelty.
Exactly. But the second robber, representing Rajas, intervenes. He argues against killing the traveler, suggesting instead that they tie him securely to a tree, take his belongings, and leave him there.
Okay, so he's spared, but trapped.
Right. They bind the traveler, leaving him struggling, which perfectly mirrors the anxiety and perpetual struggle of the Rajasic mind. Then, after some time passes, the third robber sattva returns to the scene.
Okay.
He approaches the struggling traveler, unties him, and gently guides him to the very edge of the forest, pointing out the safe road that leads back to the traveler's home.
So he saves him.
Yes, and the traveler is overwhelmed with gratitude. He pleads with the third robber to come to his home and be honored as a guest.
But the third robber refuses, right? I remember this part. He tells the traveler, "I cannot leave the forest. I am also a robber. If the police see me, they will arrest me."
Yes. The psychological implication there is just staggering. Sattva might untie you from the worst agonies of material existence. I mean, it rescues you from the destructive violence of tamas, the agonizing struggle of rajas, but it cannot step outside the forest of material nature.
Because sattva is still a constituent of prakriti.
Precisely. Happiness, intellectual satisfaction, the profound sense of moral superiority, these are all attributes of the mind, and the mind is matter.
Wow.
The eternal consciousness is meant to be completely unattached, existing solely as a pure witness. When an individual identifies with the feeling of being good or wise, they're still anchoring their identity to the material world. Sattva functions as a golden chain.
A golden chain.
Yeah. It's undoubtedly more comfortable than the iron chain of tamas or the silver chain of rajas, but it remains a chain that keeps the soul tethered to the cycle of rebirth.
Man, the idea of a golden chain completely reframes how we perceive our own spiritual or intellectual progress. It suggests that even our most noble achievements can become a subtle form of ego. So if we are constantly navigating these three chains, we need to understand the daily mechanics of how they fight for control. Because the texts describe this interaction as a constant state of psychological warfare, right? Where the victor dictates not just our daily reality, but our ultimate destiny.
Right. The commentaries outline the specific symptoms of this internal warfare. The gunas are never static. When one rises, it actively suppresses the other two.
It's a battle for dominance.
Exactly. When rajas achieves dominance, the individual experiences a massive spike in greed, restlessness, and selfish undertakings. The mind becomes utterly incapable of stillness.
Just constant agitation.
Right. And when tamas overpowers the mind, a heavy darkness sets in. The capacity to make rational decisions evaporates. It's replaced by stubbornness and illusion. But the texts provide a really fascinating description of sattva's dominance. They state that when sattva prevails, the gates of the body, referring to the sense organs, are illumined by intelligence.
That specific phrasing, the gates of the body being illumined, that's profound. It implies that our physical senses literally alter their function based on our internal state.
They absolutely do.
The texts mention that in a highly sattvic state, the ears actively refuse to hear improper or degrading sounds, and the eyes naturally reject undesirable or violent sights.
Yeah.
The senses stop being passive receivers of objective reality and become active filters directed by purity. So our internal state constructs the boundaries of our external reality.
Which is why the stakes of this internal warfare are so incredibly high, particularly at the end of life.
Oh, right. The afterlife implication.
The commentaries are unambiguous about the consequences here. Whichever guna holds dominance at the exact time of death determines the trajectory of the soul's next destination.
That's a lot of pressure for one moment.
It is. Dying while sattva is dominant leads the soul to the higher, spotless realms of the learned and pure. Dying under the influence of rajas results in being reborn among those driven by relentless action. Essentially, a return to the human realm of struggle and ambition.
And tamas.
Dying while enveloped in tamas leads to rebirth in the animal or plant kingdoms, the realms devoid of higher consciousness.
Okay, so if our current thoughts shape our mental habits and our mental habits dictate the dominant guna at the time of death, aren't we functionally building our own afterlife pixel by pixel through our daily reactions?
That's exactly what's happening.
This completely shatters any notion of biological determinism serving as an excuse for poor behavior. I mean, while the gunas operate the machinery, the individual soul still holds the responsibility of alignment.
You can't just game the system.
Right. You cannot spend decades allowing rajas and tamas to run rampant chasing endless desires or sinking into lazy delusion and then expect some sudden, unearned burst of sattvic clarity in your final moments. The mental architecture you build today is the house you're going to live in tomorrow.
Beautifully said. And this brings the texts to their most critical juncture. If tamas is an iron chain, rajas a silver chain, and sattva a golden chain that still keeps the soul bound to the cycle of rebirth, the obvious question arises.
How do you escape the forest entirely?
Exactly. And this is the precise inquiry Arjuna makes to Lord Krishna in the Gita. The ISK Khan source, authored by Chaitanya Charan Das, breaks down Arjuna's inquiry into three highly practical questions.
Okay, what are they?
First, Arjuna asks for the internal symptoms, the linga of one who has transcended the gunas. Second, he asks for their external behavior, their akara. And finally, he asks for the specific methodology, katham, by which they actually achieve this transcendence.
Okay, so a person who has successfully navigated this impossible escape, they're called a gunatita, right? One who has crossed beyond the gunas.
Right, a gunatita.
The answers provided in the text regarding their internal symptoms are just incredibly demanding. Internally, the gunatita acts as an entirely unconcerned witness. The commentary states that they do not hate the presence of light, which represents sattva, or activity, representing rajas, or delusion, representing tamas. Furthermore, they do not long for these states when they are absent.
Because they recognize that the shifting of the gunas is simply the machinery of material nature running its inevitable course. When a dark tamasic mood sweeps over their mind, they don't panic or identify with the darkness. They simply observe it.
They just watch the storm roll in.
Exactly. And when a brilliant sattvic clarity arrives, they don't cling to it or claim it as their own personal achievement. The soul remains completely untouched by the weather of the mind.
Okay, I mean, the internal detachment is somewhat easy to conceptualize, but the external behavior of the Gunatrya is where the philosophy demands a severe paradigm shift.
It really challenges our modern sensibilities.
It does. The text states they are perfectly equipoised. They look at a clod of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold as having the exact same value. They treat friends and foes alike. They remain exactly the same in honor and dishonor, praise and censure.
Yeah.
We really have to linger on the practical reality of this. Treating a clod of dirt and a piece of gold as equal could easily be dismissed as, a lack of basic economic survival instinct.
Yeah.
But treating a loyal friend who has supported you and a bitter enemy who has actively tried to destroy you with the exact same regard, how is that practically distinguishable from the numbness, delusion, and apathy of tamas?
That is the most common misunderstanding of this philosophy, without a doubt. And the commentaries are very careful to draw out a sharp distinction here. From the outside, ultimate detachment and ultimate depression might look similar.
Right.
But internally, they are absolute opposites. Tamas is a profound failure to perceive value. It's born of ignorance and numbness. The Gunattita, however, is operating from a state of hyperassociation with the divine.
Hyperassociation,
Right.
okay.
Yes. When they look at a friend and a foe, they aren't ignoring the historical actions of those individuals. Rather, their perception penetrates deeper than the temporary material identities. They see the exact same eternal divine consciousness animating both bodies. They recognize that the quote-unquote foe is simply another soul temporarily trapped by a heavy dominance of rajas or tamas.
Oh, wow. So they are seeing the underlying reality rather than just the temporary costume.
Exactly. Furthermore, when they look at a clod of dirt and a piece of gold, they aren't ignoring their utility in human society. They're recognizing them at their most fundamental, eternal level. They perceive that material wealth and dirt are just temporary, fleeting rearrangements of the exact same atomic matter.
Prakriti.
Mind-blowing. Right. Why would an eternal consciousness allow itself to be emotionally agitated by a temporary rearrangement of atoms? It isn't apathy. It's a piercing, unshakable clarity that refuses to be hypnotized by surface-level illusions.
That distinction right there, it elevates the entire concept from nihilism to ultimate liberation. It isn't that they cease to care. It's that they reserve their emotional anchoring for the only thing that is actually real and permanent.
Precise.
Which brings us to Arjuna's final question. How does a human being completely entangled in these three chains actually achieve this state? What's a practical methodology here?
So the method provided in the text is unswerving devotion to the Supreme, often referred to as bhakti. And the psychological mechanism here is crucial to understand. You cannot pull yourself out of quicksand by grabbing your own hair.
That's a great image.
You cannot use the mind to transcend the mind. By attaching consciousness completely to the Supreme, who is, by definition, completely transcendental to the material gunas, the soul establishes an anchor outside the forest.
Outside the forest of the three robbers.
Yes. The individual stops trying to extract perfect, lasting happiness from the shifting, inherently unstable sands of the material world.
Yeah.
By serving the divine with complete dedication, the soul realizes that the Supreme is the actual abode of immortality, eternal dharma, and absolute bliss. The detachment from the material world happens naturally as a byproduct of this higher attachment.
Wow. We have covered an immense philosophical landscape today. I mean, we started by mapping the cosmic womb, exploring how eternal spirit becomes entangled in the inert machinery of material nature.
It's quite a journey.
It is. We decoded the three invisible strings that control psychology. Tamas, the heavy iron chain of ignorance and inertia. Rajas, the frantic silver chain of passion, endless desire, and anxiety. And Sattva, the deceptive golden chain of purity, knowledge, and intellectual pride.
We covered it all.
We examined the relentless psychological warfare these gunas wage for dominance over our senses, literally altering how we perceive reality and dictating the ultimate destination of our consciousness at the moment of death. And finally, we uncovered the demanding blueprint for becoming a Gunattita, a liberated witness who refuses to be hypnotized by the shifting values of dirt, gold, friends, or enemies, achieving ultimate clarity by anchoring themselves entirely outside the material system.
It's a framework that forces a complete reevaluation of our daily motivations, honestly. And to conclude this analysis, Adi Shankaracharya's commentary provides one final, brilliant metaphor regarding the practical application of all this knowledge.
I want to hear this.
He acknowledges that while sattva is ultimately a trap, it's a necessary tool for escape. You have to use the third robber to navigate out of the deepest parts of the forest.
Okay.
You have to cultivate goodness, discipline, and spiritual knowledge to overpower the laziness of tamas and the greedy ambitions of rajas. The text compares this to having a thorn deeply embedded in your foot. Right. To remove it, you can't use your bare hands. You have to find another, sharper, cleaner thorn to carefully dig the first one out. Sattva is that second, cleaner thorn.
Ah, so you use the pure material to dislodge the impure material.
Exactly. But the profound realization of the Gunattita comes after the first thorn is removed. Once you've successfully extracted the dirt and the pain, what do you do with the two thorns?
You definitely don't keep them.
You do not keep the second thorn and press it into your skin simply because it was clean and useful. You throw them both away. You must ultimately let go of sattva too.
Wow. So as you navigate the complexities of your own life moving forward, examine the underlying motivations behind your actions. Take a hard look at the quote-unquote good attachments you are fiercely protecting.
Yeah, that's the real work.
Your pride in your own intellectual superiority, your rigid attachment to your peaceful routines, the subtle ego of being the most moral person in the room. Ask yourself if those golden chains are quietly keeping you anchored in the forest. You have to use the second thorn to get free, but eventually you must be willing to throw it away. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep observing the machinery of your own mind, and we will catch you next time as we continue to explore the ideas that shape our reality.